directly attached to your gallbladder to make up your CBD or your common bile duct. Then your common bile duct will going to merge with your pancreatic duct in your uh, sphincter of Od to make up your sphincter of Odin, then your ampulla of Batter then will open up to your sphincter of Odi in your duodenum. So specifically your second part of your duodenum, no? So before we tackle the different disorders of your gallbladder and your bile duct, let's talk about bile production and its physiology so that you can understand the normal physiology of bile production, then its correlation to the diseases concerning your gallbladder and your bile ducts. Now, as you know, bile is a complex fluid essential for digestion and absorption of fats. So, as well as excretions of the metabolic products such as bilirubin and cholesterol. So, this bile is usually produced by the hepatocytes, and they're going to be modified by your cholangiocytes, which lines your bile duct. And the daily secretion of your bile is around 500 to 1,000 ml in a normal adult. You know? So your bile duct is usually composed of your bile salts. Your bile salts are basically, di ba, if you're going to go back to your biochem, your bile salts are conjugated bile acids. When bile acids are conjugated, they become your bile salts. So that's the major determinant of the bile flow. So remember that your bile salts are conjugated bile acids, which will determine your the flow of your bile. Another major composition of your bile is phospholipid. So it usually mainly phosphatidylcholine. So if you're going to talk about phospholipid component of your bile, always think of your phosphatidylcholine. So what's the importance of your phospholipids? So these phospholipids will stabilize your bile salts, which in turn important for the normal flow of your bile from the liver to your right and left hepatic duct to your common bile duct after merging with your cystic duct. Diba? Um, Another composition of bile is cholesterol. So it is usually secreted in balance with bile salts and your phospholipids. Next, we have your bilirubin. So bilirubin, the type, di ba? Sorry. There are different types of bilirubin. You have your conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin. Now, since the conjugation of the bilirubin happens in your liver, the major bilirubin that is found in your bile is the conjugated form. So conjugated uh, bilirubin is the most common type of bilirubin found in your bile. Next, we also have your electrolytes and water. Now, for in the flow of the bile, it is usually di ba, the primary secretion of your bile is from the hepatocytes. Then it will be modified by your cholangiocytes, just like we have mentioned a while ago. There are two determinants of the flow. We have your bile acid dependent flow and your bile acid independent flow. So, sorry, if we say bile acid dependent flow, this one is uh, it's driven by your active bile salt secretion intercanaliculi and usually increases with meals due to your enterohepatic circulation. So if we say enterohepatic circulation, this is a circulation of the bile coming from the liver going to your duodenum, di ba? From the liver passing through your biliary tract going to your duodenum, then recycling back, going back to your liver. So that's basically just it's a it's a cycle eh. So the flow of the bile is a cycle. So arising from the liver to your biliary tract, then going to your duodenum, then absorption and reabsorption in your gut, then it goes back to the liver. So that's your enterohepatic circulation. Your bile acid independent flow on the other side is related to the secretion of electrolytes and organic anions, such as your glutathione. So we have mentioned a while ago your enterohepatic circulation. Diba? This is what I have mentioned a while ago, bile acids na galing sa liver, sa biliary tract, going to your intestine, sa second part of your duodenum. It will be reabsorbed in your terminal ileum, then it will return to the liver via portal vein and then resecreted into the bile. So, remember, ito na sinabi ko, circulation siya, so talagang umiikot lang. Kasi, 95% of bile acids are recycled through reabsorption. So, the normal pool size of your bile acids is 2 to 4 grams. Usually, nagsisirculate siya within the day 5 to 10 times. So, yung bile acid na na-form, it will circulate 5 to 10 times. So, it will also be reabsorbed in the terminal ileum 5 to 10 times a daily. So, di ba sabi natin, 95% of the bile acids are recycled. Then only small amount of bile acids are being excreted. And the number one form of excretion of your bile acids is to your feces. Di ba? We have your fecal loss. So how much bile acid is lost through uh, through bowel movement? It is around zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.4 grams per day. Now, we had what we call as your compensatory mechanism of the enterohepatic circulation. So, the hepatic synthesis matches the fecal loss. Kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng steady state. So, ibig sabihin ng steady state, even though there are losses, hello?
अरे लेक्चर ચાલે તો બોલનું કઈ
Hello, Sisumi?
આજે અહીંયા બેગ ચાલુ છે મેં તને 1 ને 20 લાખ્યા
કેવી રીતે
તારી હમણાં જમા કરે ને તારા ખાતામાં
Can
ને
you
પૈસા
mute your microphone? Desi Ben Patel. Okay, let's go back. So that's what we mean by steady state. A steady state is that even though you lost your bile acids through bowel movement, your liver will always match the lost para magkakaroon pa rin ng balance, di ba? So the maximum hepatic synthesis capacity of the liver is 5 grams per day. Now, what's the importance of knowing the steady state, the maximum hepatic capacity of your liver? Kasi disruption of the compensatory mechanism and the synthesis of your bile acids is actually it can lead to bile salt wasting, steatorrhea, or fat-filled bowel movements, and the formation of your gallstones. So that's why it's very important for us to know this pathophysiology, because disruption of the normal physiology of the bile flow and the bile synthesis is the number one pathophysiology of the different diseases associated with your gallbladder and your bile ducts. Now, as we keep on mentioning, your enterohepatic circulation is through recycling. You recycle your bile through reabsorption in your terminal ileum. So there are two types of reabsorption. It can be either through passive diffusion, which absorb your unconjugated bile acids, while your active transport will absorb your conjugated bile acids. Now, gallbladder, as you all know, the bile is not produced by the gallbladder. So the gallbladder is it only stores and concentrate the bile during fasting. So the one that produces your bile is your hepatocytes, diba? So there are two important hormones which are necessary for the storage and the release of your bile. So we have your CCK and your secretin. So don't forget your CCK because CCK is a high yield topic. It's always been asked in exams. Your CCK is a hormone that stimulates the contraction of the gallbladder and the relaxation of the sphincter of Oddi. Where do you find the sphincter of Oddi? The sphincter of Oddi is found in the opening of your ampulla of Bater sa may second part of your duodenum. So, ibig sabihin nun, your CCK will cause, technically, it will cause now the release of your bile to your intestine. Kasi nga, it will cause the sphincter of your Oddi to relax. Then it will contract the gallbladder, releasing your bile stone, tuloy, releasing your bile to your intestine. You know? Next hormone, important in the storage and release of your bile is your secretin. Your secretin is a hormone which stimulates your ductal bicarbonate secretion. It will optimize the pH for your pancreatic enzyme activity. Since, di ba, yung i-release kasi ng gallbladder mo would be a mixture of bile and pancreatic secretions. So yung CCK, yun yung responsible for the secretion of the bile coming from your gallbladder. Your secretin naman, yung pancreatic enzymes. Kasi there will be a mixture of your pancreatic enzymes and your biles that will cause now or that will aid in the digestion of your food and your cholesterol, di ba? So let's go with the anatomic pathway of your bile flow. So this is just a basic pathway of the bile. So as we mentioned, the hepatocyte will secrete the bile. It will go to your bile canaliculi, to your bile ductus, to your interlobular bile ducts. Then it will go to your septal ducts. It will meet up to your right and left hepatic ducts. Diba? Your right and left hepatic duct will make up your common hepatic duct. Then the cystic duct from the gallbladder, this one. So ito yun. So these are your bile canaliculi. They're going to the bile will flow to your right and your left hepatic duct that will join to become your common hepatic duct. Your cystic duct, which is the duct directly attached to your gallbladder, will merge with your common hepatic duct to make up your common bile duct. Then we're going to have here your ampulla of Bater and your sphincter of Oddi. So when bile is secreted, CCK will cause now your sphincter of Oddi to relax and your gallbladder to contract. Then your secretin will also initiate your pancreas to secrete pancreatic enzymes. So diretso sila sa duodenum, the second part of your duodenum, then reabsorb in your terminal ileum. So, saan pa tayo? We go now to the different types of different diseases associated with your gallbladder and your bile ducts. So the number one disorder discussed in your Harrison is your gallstone. So gallstones are highly prevalent, usually sa Western countries. They represent a major cause of your biliary and gastrointestinal morbidity. Their formation depends on your abnormal bile composition and the impaired gallbladder motility plus crystallization process. So that's why we talk about first the normal composition and the normal pathway of the bile, because like I mentioned, yung disruption of this normal flow and normal compositions of your bile can lead to the formation of your gallstones. So usually gallstones, it usually prevalent in patients that are more than 50 years old, especially in women. So it's more common in women than men, di ba? If we say gallstone, usually sa mga um dito na, women that are yung I forgot the term. Yung women that are or which are on reproductive state. So mga reproductive state women, sila usually yung common na uh, they are the one that are usually gets the gallstone. No? When it comes to ethnicity, it's usually highest in Native Americans, Hispanics, then non-Hispanics. It's lowest to your Black Americans. So gallstone can also be genetic, can also have a genetic predisposition. So it can be due to inherited factors influencing your bile composition and your cholesterol metabolism. We will discuss later on. There are certain mutations, certain genetic mutations that affects the metabolism of the cholesterol and increases the risk of patients in developing your gallstones. So there are two types of gallstones according to Harrison. We have your cholesterol stones and your pigment stones. So the number one, the most common type of gallstone is made up of cholesterol. Diba? It's usually 50% cholesterol monohydrate combined with calcium salts, bile pigments, proteins, and your fatty acids. Now, less than 20% are pigment stones. They can either be black or brown. So, depending on the color of the stone, it is linked to different type of diseases. So for black stone, it's associated with cirrhosis, Gilbert syndrome, cystic fibrosis. And the main composition of your black pigment stone is calcium bilirubinate. Sorry. While your brown pigment stone, usually, ang main composition niya is unconjugated bilirubin with cholesterol or protein associated with chronic biliary infection and parasitic infections, which are common in Asia. So we will discuss the different parasites that can cause liver, that affects the gallbladder. So according to Harrison's, these are the predisposing factors for cholesterol and pigmented gallstone formation. So we have your cholesterol stones. You can just read this na lang. And then you have your pigmented stones. So these are your predisposing factors for cholesterol and pigment gallstone formation. Now, when it comes to formation of your cholesterol stone, there are actually three mechanisms that can lead to its formation. You have your bile supersaturation with cholesterol, nucleation of cholesterol monohydrate crystals, and gallbladder hypomotility. So we go first with your bile supersaturation with cholesterol. So if we say bile supersaturation with cholesterol, this is usually due to hypersecretion of cholesterol, which is the most important mechanism in the formation of your cholesterol gallstone. So it usually seen in obesity, metabolic syndrome, high caloric or cholesterol rich diet, and sometimes medications can also cause by supersaturation. Like for example, the use of your clofibrate. Now, it's also related to the increased SMJ-CoA reductase activity, which enhances your hepatic cholesterol uptake. Diba? You're familiar with your HMJ CoA reductase. That's your rate limiting step. A rate limiting enzyme in the formation of your cholesterol. That is the one that's being blocked by your statins. Now, um, there's also genetic reasons while there's a formation of your cholesterol gallstones. Diba? We have mentioned a while ago that there are certain genetic mutations happens that causes now predisposition in the formation of your gallstones. So, example of this genetic mutations would be your SNP and ABCG5G8 transporter. So this is your single SNP, means single nucleotide polymorphism in your ABCG5G8 genes, which is located in uh your short arm of chromosome 2, which affects now your cholesterol absorption and metabolism, leading to cholesterol hypersecretion. Your CYP7A1 mutation naman, or your cholesterol 7 alpha hydroxylase 7A1 mutation, it causes now reduced bile acid synthesis. While your MDR, ABCB4 mutation, or your multi-drug resistant protein 3 mutation is cause now defective phospholipid secretion. Then there's also what we call as hereditary clustering in American Chilean Indians and Chilean Hispanics. Now we're done with the first mechanism. Let's talk about your second mechanism, your nucleation of your cholesterol monohydrate crystals. So what do we mean by nucleation of cholesterol monohydrate crystals? So there is a di ba, the nucleation is the key step in the formation of your cholesterol crystals. So it is the di ba, in the series of steps in that will lead to the formation of your cholesterol stones. Your nucleation is the key step. It will cause now the formation of your solid cholesterol monohydrate crystals from the solution. So, what will happen? There will be the cholesterol molecules will aggregate. It will organize into crystalline lattice. Then it will form your cholesterol monohydrate crystals. So that's what we mean by nucleation of cholesterol monohydrate crystals. Next, we have your gallbladder hypomotility. Your gallbladder hypomotility, it prevents the clearance of the crystals or the sludge. It is usually associated with fasting or the use of your TPN. What's your TPN? Your total parenteral nutrition, pregnancy, drugs, and those drugs impairing now your motility. Your example, we have your HNBB, diba? Your hyoscine. Now, gallstone can also be formed during pregnancy and during rapid weight reduction. So gallstone usually in pregnancy happens because there's an increased cholesterol saturation in the third trimester and there's a decreased gallbladder motility. So 20 to 30% of the time, nagkakaroon lang ng gallbladder sludge. But in 5 to 12% of the time, stones will form. However, they are usually asymptomatic and usually nagre-resolve postpartum. Then, in some instances, rapid weight reduction can also can also promote or instigate the formation of your gallstones, especially those who have very low caloric diets and those who underwent bariatric surgery. So 10 to 20% of the time, patients develop gallstones. They are preventable with using of your UDCA or also deoxycholic acid with 500 to 600 milligrams per day. So far, do you have any questions? Can you understand me? Sorry, I really don't have a voice right now. Naintindihan niyo ba ako? Do you understand my voice?
Yes, po.
You know?
Yes, po.
Yes po, Doc.
Okay. Yeah. According to Harrison's, these are your diagnostic evaluation. These are the tests that can be used in the diagnostic evaluation of your gallbladder. So we have your ultrasound, your plain abdominal X-ray, and your cholecystography, like your HIDA. So for your ultrasound, it is usually rapid, accurate in identification of your gallstones. It can provide a real-time scanning. However, it is limited. The diagnostic limitations of using this one is if there's bowel gas, massive obesity, and ascites. This will obscure kasi the different organs. So sometimes, di ba, makikita ninyo if you already read ultrasounds, sometimes they will put there gallbladder cannot be visualized or pancreas not visualized because of overlying gas, yan, or massive ascites. Now, your ultrasound is the procedure of choice for the detection of your stones. Next, we have your plain abdominal X-ray, which is readily available at low cost. However, it has a relatively low yield and usually contraindicated in pregnancy. So the pathognomonic findings for gallstone in your plain abdominal X-ray is the calcified gallstones. Kasi usually if there's a gallstone, it can be seen as a regio-opaque material. Yan. Next, we also have your cholecystography. It is used for accurate identification of your cystic duct obstruction, simultaneous assessment of the bile ducts. However, it's just like your X-ray, it's contraindicated in pregnancy and with serum bilirubin na more than 100 to 205 and cholecystogram of low resolution. It is usually indicated for the confirmation of acute cholecystitis. Na yun. Now, as we have mentioned, your gold ultrasound, it is the gold standard for the detection of your gallstone. It usually detects gallstone which are more than 1.5 millimeters. Plain abdominal, it detects the calcified stone, like mentioned a while ago. Your oral cholecystogram, OCG, which are already obsolete and replaced by US. then your radionuclide imaging. Now, the clinical feature of your gallstone, the hallmark symptom is your biliary colic. So it is a severe, steady right upper quadrant or epigastric pain with radiation to the right scapula, right shoulder, or interscapular region. So usually, it typically lasts for 30 minutes to 5 hours. If it's usually more than 5 hours, hindi na siya usually meron na tayong acute cholecystitis secondary to cholelithiasis. So remember that the typical pain for your gallstone is 30 minutes to 5 hours. So if it's already more than 5 hours, you suspect already acute cholecystitis. This biliary colic or pain is usually triggered by fatty meals, large meals after fasting, or nocturnal, and usually it is nocturnal in onset. So the clinical presentation of the gallstone usually depends on whether the stone remains silent or produce biliary obstruction. Kasi remember that there are asymptomatic, usually gallstone is asymptomatic. However, if it becomes symptomatic, doon na nagiging problem. Other associated symptoms for your gallstone would be nausea and vomiting, which is usually accompanied by pain, fever and chills indicated by complications such as acute cholecystitis, cholangitis, and gallstone pancreatitis. So non-specific dyspeptic symptoms may also experience, such as your bloating, your flatulence, and postprandial fullness. Laboratory-wise, kapag merong obstruction, you will always going to see elevation of bilirubin and alkaline phosphatase. Now, there are two types of um, there are two types of individuals with gallstones. Those who are asymptomatic and those that are symptomatic. So for 60 to 80% remain silent for up to 25 years. That's for asymptomatic gallstones. The annual risk for symptoms usually 2 to 4% lang siya in first 5 years and decrease thereafter. So the annual risk of complications for patients with asymptomatic gallstone is very low. It's only 0.1 to 0.3%. So in patients with asymptomatic gallstones, we usually observe and we start medical dissolution using your ursodeoxycholic acid, which we're going to discuss later on. And prophylactic cholecystectomy is not warranted for patients with asymptomatic gallstone. So remember that na kapag asymptomatic, hindi usually inooperahan, we start with medical dissolution using your ursodeoxycholic acid. While patients with symptomatic gallstones, those who have higher likelihood of recurrent pain and complications, examples of which are young patients, kasi their symptoms are more likely to progress as to compare with patients that are older, then then also diabetic patients, possibly higher risk for septic complications through exact risk, though exact risk is uncertain. So there are only two treatment for gallstones. It can either be laparoscopic it can either be cholecystectomy, which is a surgical approach, which can either be open and laparoscopic. Before, pero open, ngayon, since there's already advancement in the field of surgery, laparoscopic na ang gold standard for symptomatic gallstone. But take note that not all hospitals kasi are capable of doing laparoscopic cholecystectomy. So sometimes, especially sa mga smaller hospitals, district hospitals, they still do open cholecystectomy, which is no longer being applied sa US, no? Kaya nakalagay dito, laparoscopic cholecystectomy because your book is from the US. Sa US, hindi na nag-open cholecystectomy. Di ba? If you watch your Grey's Anatomy, di ba? It's a Jurassic procedure daw, sabi ni Dr. Yang, Christina Yang. Kasi it's already obsolete in your developed countries. Kasi they already advocate for non-invasive surgeries. Kaya nakalagay dyan, laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Pero in our country, since it's a third world country, hindi lahat, not all hospitals capable of doing laparoscopic surgeries. We still do open. Actually, sa mga district hospitals and sa mga government hospitals, puro open pa rin yung ginagawa because it is cheaper as compared to your laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Another treatment is your medical dissolution. So your medical dissolution is the use of your ursodeoxycholic acid. So as we have mentioned, your cholecystectomy is your definitive treatment for gallstone. However, the decisions regarding surgery is usually based on the symptoms, the severity of the symptoms, risk of complications, and surgical outcomes. So if the symptoms is severe, the risk of complications is high, and the surgical outcome is seen to be good, you usually do cholecystectomy, no? And based on your book, it's laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Now, what is the indication of your cholecystectomy? So usually, we do your cholecystectomy in symptomatic gallstones when symptoms are severe or frequent enough to impair your daily function. So we also do cholecystectomy if there's a history of gallstone-related complications, such as prior acute cholecystitis, gallstone pancreatitis, and gallstone fistula. So in patients, they are what we also call as your high-risk patients, those that are predisposed to severe outcomes. So patients that that are high risk for complications would be those who have previous attack of acute cholecystitis, even if it's symptomatic. Those who have a very large gallstones, those that are more than 3 centimeter, and those who have congenital gallbladder anomalies with gallstones. Now, laparoscopic cholecystectomy is the preferred surgical approach in elective settings kasi nga it is lower in overall cost. There's a minimal post-operative disability. There's a shorter hospitalization. The complication rate is very low, about 4%. The mortality is also very, very low, less than 0.1%. The bile duct injury can also be is also low at 0.2 to 0.6, which is comparable naman to your open surgery. But remember even though a patient underwent cholecystectomy, they can still have gallstone. Doon na pumapasok ang tinatawag nating stones that are lodged in your common bile duct. We will discuss it later on. Your choledocholitis. Diba? Your choledocholitis is gallstone that are large, that is large in your common bile duct. Diba? Your common bile duct kasi is after na ng gallbladder. So when you remove kasi the gallbladder, you retain your gallstone. You retain your common bile duct. So sometimes, kung merong stone na naiwan doon, can still cause symptoms. So doon napapasok yung ERCP, your endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, in cases of your choledocholitis. We're going to discuss naman your choledocholitis in the next succeeding slide. So for the medical treatment or medical therapy, we have what we call as your gallstone dissolution. So who are candidates for gallstone dissolution using your UDCA? We have your those patients that have functioning gallbladder. They have irresolute, non-calcified cholesterol stones, and those stones that are less than 10 millimeters. Uh, Pinaka-best ang result ng UDCA when it comes to gallstone dissolution if the size of the stone is less than 5. So what's the usual dose for UDCA? It's 10 to 15 milligrams per kilogram per day. There are two doses of your ursodeoxycholic acid that's available in the market. You have your 250 and your 300. Now, when it comes to its efficacy and the outcome, the dissolution rate is around 50% within 6 to 24 months. Di ba sinabi natin na best results achieved if less than 10, better kapag less than 5, kasi if it's more than 10, it's rarely dissolved. So usually kasi your UDCA can only dissolve your cholesterol stones. So if it's a pigmented stone, they don't usually respond to your UDCA. So only less than 10% of symptomatic gallstone patients are eligible. Then there's a very high rate of recurrence. So even though you take your UDCA, you can still have cholelithiasis later on. Kasi 30 to 50% of the time, babalik yung gallstone within 3 to 5 years. So usually, we give long-term therapy with UDCA. Sometimes, umaabot ng years. And individuals with recurrent gallstones can take UDCA indefinitely. Next, we have your acute and your chronic cholecystitis. So, cholecystitis refers to the inflammation of your gallbladder. So, it's usually commonly due to the cystic duct obstruction by a gallstone. Di ba sinabi natin kanina, if it's more than 5 hours, uh, yung pain from gallstone, you should always consider the possibility of acute cholecystitis. And acute cholecystitis, the inflammation of the gallbladder, usually associated with obstruction by gallstones. It can either be acute, chronic, calculous, or complicated. So we'll start with your acute cholecystitis. So basically, ang foundation of your acute cholecystitis is inflammatory triggers. So it can either be mechanical, chemical, or bacterial. Mechanical, it can be due to the obstruction of the cystic duct through your gallstone, which causes now increase in your interluminal pressure, leading to mucosal ischemia, then inflammation. It can also be due to chemical. It is due to the release of your lysolecithin, the lecithin breakdown by your phospholipase. So it can also be due to bacterial. So usually bacterial infection with cholecystitis is present 50 to 85% of the time. So sometimes when you go to when you go to wards, then you encounter patients with cholecystitis, you often see them with antibiotics. We usually cover gram-negative. Kasi the number one cause of your acute cholecystitis are your gram-negative bloods. So we usually give either cefuroxime or ceftriaxone. So cefuroxime is a second generation cephalosporin. Yung ceftriaxone is a third generation cephalosporin. The most common bacteria that is implicated with acute cholecystitis is E. coli, Klebsiella, sometimes Streptococcus, and Clostridium. But most of the time, it's always E. coli and Klebsiella. So, what are the clinical features of your acute cholecystitis? It usually begins as biliary colic that worsens and persists. So, the pain is steady sa may right upper quadrant with radiation, with associated nausea, vomiting, and anorexia. fever, which is low grade, but sometimes accompanied by chills. In cases of acute cholecystitis, jaundice is usually uncommon, but may develop due to ductal or lymphatic compressions. Now, patients with acute cholecystitis, typical physical exam findings includes now your right upper quadrant tenderness. So you can observe your Murphy's sign. So don't forget this one. This is a highly um, topic, your Murphy's sign. Your Murphy's sign is your inspiratory arrest on the deep right upper quadrant palpation. So when you deeply palpate your the right upper quadrant of your patient, they will stop to breathe because of severe pain. That's your Murphy's sign. Sometimes we also have your palpable enlarged gallbladder, which is seen 25 to 50% of the time. You can also see localized rebound tenderness, abdominal distension, hypoactive bowel sounds, and in patients with perforation, you can already see generalized peritonitis. Now, the clinical triad of your acute cholecystitis is right upper quadrant pain, fever, and your leukocytosis. Now, leukocytosis, usually nakakita ka ng 10 to 15,000 per microliter with left shift. If we say shift to the left ng WBC, nakakita ka ng immature WBCs. So, yung mga metamyelocyte, promyelocytes, mga ganun. You can see them kasi nga, it's a marker of inflammation. Inflammation kasi inflammation and severe infection, it can stimulate your bone marrow to produce more cells. Since there's overwhelming infection and inflammation, hindi makakope up yung bone marrow mo, aside maubos yung mature WBCs, ang tendency, it will produce immature cells. So that's why you sometimes see shift to the left. So that's what we mean by shift to the left, the leukocytosis. Now, imaging, of course, you use your ultrasound. You often see 90 to 25% of the time gallstones with wall thickening and pericholecystic fluid and duct dilatation. So we also use your HIDA, di ba? You have mentioned your HIDA a while ago. Your hepatobiliary immunodiacetic acid scan, which when you used and you don't visualize the gallbladder, it's a confirmatory test for acute cholecystitis. Now, 75% of the time, they usually improved with conservative therapy in 2 to 7 days. So that's hydration, pain reliever, antibiotic. However, 25% of the time, 25% of patients may develop complications. So that's where surgery comes in. So these patients now will require surgical interventions. Now, patients who had acute cholecystitis from gallstone can also have a recurrence, 25% within 1 year and 60% within 6 years. So that's why ang preferred treatment pa rin is early cholecystectomy. Kasi the chance, kasi di ba, for example, a patient develop acute cholecystitis from gallstone. Yung patient nag-improve from conservative therapy. Nag-improve sa hydration, nag-improve sa antibiotic therapy, nag-improve sa pain reliever. However, as you can see, there's a very high chance for recurrence. 25% within 1 year and 60% within 6 years. So in order to prevent this one, ang preferred treatment talaga is early cholecystectomy. So we do laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Now, there is what we call as your Merit-Ziss syndrome. So this is a rare complication of your chronic gallstone. Yung gallstone mo na yung gallstone na large sa may neck of the gallbladder or sa may cystic duct. So it will now, this one, may picture pala. Your gallstone will lodge in the neck of your gallbladder or in your cystic duct, causing now obstruction of your common hepatic duct. So, yeah, it will compress your common bile duct kasi this is common. This is your hepatic. This is already your common bile duct. So there's a compression of your common bile duct causing now obstructive jaundice. So if we say obstructive jaundice due to the compression of the CBD from a gallstone that is lodged in your cystic duct, that's your Meniere's syndrome. Management, still cholecystectomy with stone removal. It can be diagnosed through ultrasound, ERCP, your endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography, or your magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography, or MRCP. Now, what is that? The definitive treatment for acute cholecystitis in its acute complication is still surgical removal of the gallbladder. Di ba? We have been mentioning a while ago na ang taas ng recurrence ng acute cholecystitis from gallstone. So talagang ang definitive treatment for patients with acute cholecystitis is the surgical removal or your cholecystectomy. However, preoperative stabilization and supportive measures is also required to reduce morbidity and mortality. So ito yung sinasabi natin na giving of your antibiotics and hydration. So there are actually two treatment options for acute cholecystitis. We do medical therapy, but still the definitive treatment is surgical. Now for medical therapy, we usually do preoperative stabilization. We put the patient on NPO. We eliminate the oral intake. Why do we put the patient to NPO? Diba, remember kanina that the secretion of your bile is stimulated by food. So the CCK will cause your sphincter of Oddi to relax and your gallbladder to contract. So kapag if you eat, it will cause now aggravation of the pain kasi nga magko-contract yung gallbladder mo in response to the CCK. So that's why we usually put patients on NPO. Next, we have your nasogastric suction, usually indicated for patient with persistent vomiting or ileus. We also do fluid electrolyte collection. We replace the extracellular volume and correct the abnormalities. And of course, we give adequate pain control. Now, antibiotic therapy is also one of the cornerstone in the medical therapy for acute cholecystitis. So it's usually given in moderate to severe acute cholecystitis or when superinfection is suspected. As we have mentioned a while ago, the number one culprit would be your E. coli, your Klebsiella, your Enterococcus and Enterobacter, sometimes Streptococcus. So that's why effective regimens are usually those that are broad spectrum, covering covering your gram-negative and anaerobic microorganisms. So we have your piptazo, your piperacillin, tazobactam, your imepinem or your meropenem, your carbapenems. We have also your cephalosporin plus your metronidazole, your levofloxacin plus your metronidazole. Now, the metronidazole here, ang purpose ng metronidazole dito is to cover the anaerobic microorganisms. Ceftriaxone covers your gram-negative, levofloxacin also covers your gram-negative. Your carbapenems is a very good broad spectrum. Your piptazo and your carbapenem, such as your meropenem and imepinem, they are both broad spectrum antibiotic which has a very good activity against your gram-negative and anaerobic microorganisms as well. So you don't need to pair them with metronidazole kasi they already have anaerobic coverage. Diba? Now, surgical therapy, usually emergency or urgent cholecystectomy or percutaneous cholecystectomy is indicated if complications is suspected or confirmed, such as in cases of your emphysematous cholecystitis, and gallbladder perforations. While uncomplicated acute cholecystitis, early laparoscopic cholecystectomy within 48 to 72 hours after the diagnosis is recommended. So, timing of surgical intervention is very important. Ang trend kasi ngayon, early surgery is favored due to shorter hospital stays and no increase in the complication rate. However, in patients kasi that are high risk or those that are debilitated, they may undergo they have higher risk, they have higher risk for mortality. So that's why sometimes we do delayed surgery. So kapag sinabi natin delayed surgery for acute cholecystitis due to gallstones, usually more than 6 weeks, those patients with unacceptable surgical risk due to comorbidities and uncertain diagnosis of acute cholecystitis. So we optimize the patient medically prior to doing the surgery. Now, patients who are undergoing surgery is also at risk for mortality. Emergency cholecystectomy is 1 to 3% chance of mortality, while early elective cholecystectomy nasa around 0.5% naman in patients that are less than 60 years old, while the risk for mortality increases with age, comorbids, organ diseases, and complicated gallbladder diseases. Uh, Now we go to the post-cholecystectomy complications. So we have your early and your long-term outcomes. For early post-operative complications, it can cause atelectasis, which is a very common pulmonary complication. So that's why, di ba, we advise patients to do deep breathing exercises. Now, other complications include your subphrenic abscess or wound abscess. It can also form hemorrhages, internal or external, biliary enteric fistula, bile leaks, and retained CBD stones. Di ba? Ito yung sinasabi natin na even though you remove the stone, even though you remove the gallbladder, sometimes may naiiwang stone, those stones that are lodged in your common bile duct, causing now your choledocolithiasis. Now, long-term outcomes, usually 75 to 90% of the time naman, nagkakaroon ng relief of perioperative symptoms. However, if there's a persistent symptoms, usually due to non-biliary disorders na such as reflex esophagitis, PUD, pancreatitis, and irritable bowel syndrome. Do you have any question? Do you have any questions so far? Okay, let's proceed. We have your we have now we go to your chronic cholecystitis, diba? If yung we already done with your acute cholecystitis, which is a sudden severe gallbladder inflammation, usually lasting 2 to 3 days. If it's chronic cholecystitis, it's usually long term, associated with persisting for months, often more than 3 months. So kapag chronic cholecystitis, remember, more than 3 months. So it's usually associated with gallstones caused by repeated or acute subacute inflammations or persistent mechanical irritations. Usually, 25% of the time, bacteria infection is present, and it can usually remain asymptomatic or progress to acute attacks or complications. Now, there's also what we call as your calculus cholecystitis. So this is the inflammation of your gallbladder with not due to stones. So usually this is a severe gallbladder inflammation without stones, typically affecting those critically ill patients and those who are hospitalized patients due to bile stasis, ischemia, and infection. So this factor, like we have mentioned, those that are critically ill, post-operative patients, those that have prolonged fasting, trauma, burn, sepsis, postpartum, those who are receiving total parenteral nutrition, those who have vasculitis, diabetes, gallbladder torsion, infections, uh, are very high risk for developing your calculus cholecystitis. So, usually, very similar lang naman yung clinical features. So, they have the same clinical feature, except that it usually occur in severely ill patients and they don't see gallstones. Diba? So, you can either use ultrasound or CT scan, causing you're going to see inflamed gallbladder without stones. So it has a high complication rate. So early diagnosis and surgical intervention is very essential. So we usually do medical kaagad. No? Next disorder would be your emphysematous cholecystitis. So kapag sinabi natin emphysematous cholecystitis, this is the ischemia or gangrenous gallbladder, which is due to infection by a gas-producing organisms. So what are the examples of our gas-producing organisms? Your Clostridium perfringens. Di ba? Yung Welchii is a very old name of Clostridium. Last na encounter ko pa yung Welch is when I was a medical technology student. Next, you have your E. coli. Predisposition, it's usually seen in elderly men and diabetics. It can be usually diagnosed using your plain abdominal film. So what is the pathognomonic findings? In emphysematous cholecystitis, you can see air in the lumen, wall, or pericholecystic tissues. So we usually do surgery, then antibiotics. Yeah. Now we go to the disorders of your bile ducts. So we go to the last part of the lecture, which is the diseases of your uh ano ba to? Diseases of your bile ducts. So the disease of the bile ducts encompasses the diverse group of disorders involving your extrahepatic and intrahepatic biliary tree. It can be either obstructive, infectious, inflammatory, congenital, neoplastic, or iatrogenic. We're going to discuss one by one. So the conditions are these conditions kasi is they are clinically important because they often present with jaundice, abdominal pain, cholangitis, and biliary obstruction, and usually may lead to life-threatening complications such as sepsis or secondary biliary cirrhosis. So that's why it's very important for you to know these diseases of the bile ducts. Now, as we have mentioned a while ago, the major categories of your bile duct disorder is congenital, structural, obstructive, infectious, inflammatory, neoplastic, iatrogenic. So, examples We're going to discuss din naman sila isa-isa. So the common presentations of patients with bile duct disorder is jaundice. This is due to the impaired blood flow, di ba? It can also cause na biliary colic or the intermittent colicky right upper quadrant pain from transit obstruction. So ito yung number 2 most common clinical presentation of patient with biliary tract disorders. Now, disorders of the biliary tract can lead to cholangitis or the ascending infection of the gallbladder. It is characterized by your Charcot's triad and your Reynolds pentad. So don't ever forget your Charcot's and your Reynolds pentad because they are always most often asked. So these are must-knows. Huh? Your Charcot's triad is right upper quadrant pain, fever, and jaundice. If it accompanied by hypotension and mental status changes, then that's your Reynolds pentad. Okay, so it can also lead to pruritus, malabsorption, and fat-soluble vitamin deficiency. What are your fat-soluble vitamins? Your ADEK, ADEK, in prolonged cholestasis. It can lead to weight loss, cachexia, or what you call as your painless jaundice. Remember this, if you see painless jaundice, most of the time, it's pancreatic malignancy. Basta if you ever saw painless in cases, for example, bigyan nila kayo ng cases, you see painless jaundice, automatic, isipin nyo, number 1 differential, pancreatic cancer. Now, how do we diagnose patients with biliary tract disorder? We usually see increased alkaline phosphatase and increased gamma glutamyl transferase, tama ba ako? GGT, conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, which is what we call a cholestatic pattern. Sometimes it can also lead to transaminases, but usually less than 5 times upper limit ng normal, unless with current hepatitis. What are your transaminases? Your ASTs and your ALT. Now, according to Harrison, these are the diagnostic tests that can be used to evaluate your bile ducts. Now, ultrasound, it will always be the first line. It will show bile duct dilatation, stone, and masses. CT scan, it will define the extent of the obstruction and mass lesions, while your magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography or MRCP, non-invasive mapping of your biliary tract. While your ERCP or endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography naman is both diagnostic and therapeutic. Kung ito, if you're familiar with endoscopy, this is a special type of endoscopy. Yung camera nasa gilid, nasa side. If you ever go into internal medicine later on, then you're going to assist with MRCP, ERCP. It's very, very nice. You will going to access sa ERCP kasi you will access the biliary tract, the bile ducts coming from, di ba, coming from your duodenum. So, ang point of entry mo would be the duodenum. So, from the duodenum, second part of the duodenum, you're going to find the sphincter of Oddi. Then, from your sphincter of Oddi, you will going to deploy the dye. Then, fluoroscopy. Titignan mo kung nasaan yung stone. Then, they will do sphirectomy. Yung they will cut a portion of your sphincter of Oddi, then you're going to, kumbaga, in basic term, susungkitin. You will going to, ano ba English nun? Basta yung, you're going to extract the stone. So the stone that are lodged in your common bile duct, you will going to extract it using your ERCP. So, yung point of entry ng ERCP is the duodenum. Second part of the duodenum, sphincter of Oddi, doon yung point of entry. Doon, there, you will going to extract the stone from there. So that's why it's called both diagnostic and therapeutic. ERCP is diagnostic and therapeutic kasi nga, diagnostic, you do fluoroscopy. You will check if there's a presence of stone and obstruction. It's therapeutic because you can do stone extraction. So if you ever go into IM, try to observe or assist in ERCP. It's very nice. Next, we have your congenital anomalies. So, congenital anomalies of your biliary tree are rare but clinically significant. So, they are often presenting with obstructive jaundice, recurrent cholangitis, or complications such as cirrhosis and cholangiocarcinoma. There are three most relevant entities na we're going to tackle each. We have your biliary atresia or hypoplasia, you have your choledochal cyst, and your congenital biliary ectasia or your which includes both your Caroli's disease and your congenital hepatic fibrosis. Now, for your biliary atresia or hypoplasia, there's a atretic or hypoplastic lesion of your extrahepatic and large intrahepatic bile ducts, usually most common biliary anomaly in the infancy. Clinical presentation includes severe obstructive jaundice within the first month of life, and usually yung baby, acolic yung stool. If we see acolic, pale. If we see acolic, paano naman describe yung pale? Grayish stool. Walang kulay. Kasi nga, there's no bile salts, di ba? Di ba sinabi natin before that one of the excretion of your bile is through bowel movement. So since there's obstruction, hindi nakakapunta doon yung bile, which is the one responsible for your bilirubin, di ba? You're responsible for the color of the stool. The diagnosis usually clinical, and imaging suspicion can be confirmed by surgical exploration and operative cholangiography. Usually they do Roux-en-Y, choledochogenostomy. So kapag sinabi mong Roux-en-Y, that's your choledochogenostomy. Most patients will also undergo your Kasai procedure or your hepatic portoenterostomy. This is the attempt to restoration ng bile flow. However, even with surgery, yung mataas pa rin yung chance of patients to have chronic cholangitis, hepatic fibrosis, and even portal hypertension. So, hindi ganun kaganda yung kanyang prognosis. Now, next we have your choledochal cyst. This is a cystic dilatation of the common bile duct or the verticulum formation in your intraduodenal common bile duct segment. Nagkakaroon ng reflux of pancreatic juice into the bile ducts. This will lead into inflammation, stenosis, cholangitis, and obstruction, usually seen after the age of 10 and with gradual progression. Only 1/3 will show the classic triad. So the classic triad of your choledochal cyst is abdominal pain, jaundice, and palpable abdominal mass. So there's a very high risk for formation of your cholangiocarcinoma. So that's why you need to do surgical cyst excision plus biliary enteric anastomosis para ma-prevent mo yung risk for developing cholangiocarcinoma. Next, we have your congenital biliary ectasia, which is your intrahepatic bile duct dilatation, classified as can be both Caroli's disease, which affect your major intrahepatic radical dilatation, or your congenital hepatic fibrosis, or it can be mixed Caroli's and congenital hepatic fibrosis with the following clinical manifestation. First, your recurrent cholangitis, hepatic abscesses, and brown pigment gallstones in your ectatic ducts. So usually we do long-term antibiotic therapy to reduce the cholangitis. Number one complication would be biliary cirrhosis with portal hypertension, extrahepatic biliary obstruction, and it can also lead to cholangiocarcinoma, just like your choledochal cyst. Now we go to your choledocholithiasis. So choledocholithiasis is just like I've mentioned a while ago. It's the passage of or presence of the gallstone in your bile duct. So even after surgery, pwede ka pa rin magkaroon ng retained or undetected stones in the bile duct. Kasi sometimes patients already undergone cholecystectomy, nag-complain pa rin sila. They will come to you and complain, Doc, I'm still having right upper abdominal pain, bloatedness, nausea, vomiting, mga ganon, which are symptoms of gall's acute cholecystitis. Kasi nga, there's a undetected stones that were left in your common bile duct. You don't remove kasi the common bile duct when you do cholecystectomy. Yung cystic duct lang. The type of bile duct stones, it can be primary stones. It can be primary or secondary. The primary stone, which are brown pigment stones, they are actually formed in the bile ducts itself. It can cause the risk factor for the developing of your primary stone is hepatobiliary parasitism, chronic recurrent cholangitis, congenital anomalies such as Caroli's disease, your ductal abnormalities, and your MDR3 ABCB4 gene defect. Now, the majority of the common bile duct stone is your cholesterol stones, your secondary stones, the majority type of stone. Diba? Usually, it will migrate from your cystic duct going down to your common bile duct. So they usually remain asymptomatic for years. Some individuals may have passed spontaneously into the duodenum, pero often, patients will present with biliary colic or complications such as your cholangitis, obstructive jaundice, and pancreatitis. So what should we do to check if we have choledocholithiasis? The definitive test is still cholangiography. So it can either be endoscopic or through magnetic resonance. It can either be preoperative, you can do your ERCP or MRCP, or intraoperatively cholangiography during cholecystectomy. So almost 15% of patients undergoing cholecystectomy have CVD stones. So you must suspect CVD stones if there's a history of jaundice or pancreatitis, there's abnormal liver function test, or there's a dilated common bile duct or intraductal stones, which is seen on your ultrasound or your MRCP. Next, we go to your cholangitis. So cholangitis is basically the inflammation of the bile ducts, usually secondary to at least partial obstruction of your bile flow. So the infection plays a role in your acute cases with bacteria cultured from bile 75% of the time early in the course. So what's the most common microorganism associated with cholangitis? It's still your E. coli. Then Klebsiella, Enterococcus, Enterobacter, and Pseudomonas. Pero kapag tinanong kayo, what is the most common? It's still E. coli. So that's why cholangitis, usually we give gram-negative bacilli coverage, yung mga cephalosporins natin. So ito yung sinasabi natin kanina, in cases of acute cholangitis, we do fever, jaundice, and right upper quadrant pain. is your Charcot's triad. While your patients with hypotension and confusion, nagkakaroon na tayo ng ascending cholangitis. That's your Reynolds pentad. So your acute cholangitis can either be non-suppurative or suppurative. Non-suppurative, which is the most common, they usually respond with antibiotics and supportive measures, while suppurative type of acute cholangitis, there is pus under the pressure in a completely obstructed ductal system. It can lead to severe toxicity, mental confusion, bacteremia, or septic shock. So in these cases, antibiotics alone is insufficient. So that's why we do endoscopic or surgical drainage. So we do ERCP, then surgical drainage if ERCP fails or is unavailable. Now, for obstructive jaundice, it can either be due to cholelithiasis or malignancies, di ba? We have what we call as your pancreatic cancer ang usually nagkukos ng obstructive jaundice. Painless jaundice. So that's the head of the pancreas. Bukol sa may head of the pancreas. Kapag sinabi din Courvoisier's law, ito yung palpable enlarged gallbladder in cases of your obstructive jaundice. So we usually request for serum bilirubin. So if the serum bilirubin is usually nasa 5 milligrams per deciliter or 85.5 micromoles per liter, usually suggest CBD stone. Kapag more than 15, usually can also indicate cholelithiasis. More than 20, na serum bilirubin may indicate neoplastic obstruction. So in cases of obstructive jaundice, post-hepatic, so most often than not, your alkaline phosphatase is elevated. Aminotransferases in your bilirubin, they can also be elevated. However, bilirubin normalizes 1 to 2 weeks after the relief. Yung alkaline phosphatase ang medyo slow ang recovery. Now, we also go to your extreme decompression of your bile ducts. So the most common cause of your extreme decompression of the bile ducts is your carcinoma of the pancreatic head, leading to what we call as your painless jaundice. No? So other causes can be acute or chronic pancreatitis, lymph node involvements of the porta hepatis. In cases of your lymphoma and metastatic carcinoma can also cause extrinsic compression of your bile ducts. Now, let's go to your gallstone-associated pancreatitis. So the number one cause of your pancreatitis is still alcohol. Pero the most common non-alcoholic cause of acute pancreatitis is gallstone. Usually seen in 15% of acute cholecystitis and 30% of patients with cholelithiasis. So there's a passage of the gallstone to the CBD. So naiipit din yung content ng pancreatic enzymes. Next, we have your secondary biliary cirrhosis. This is due to the prolonged or intermittent bile duct obstruction with or without your recurrent cholangitis. Ang number one consequence ng biliary cirrhosis, it can cause now your associated, it can cause now fat-soluble vitamins or ADEC deficiencies. It can also lead to portal hypertension, hepatic failure, and death. Now, hepatobiliary parasitism can also cause, it's also under the diseases of the biliary tracts, diba? So, parasites can cause biliary tract obstruction. Your trematodes or your flukes, which is common in your endemic regions. Examples ng flukes, trematodes, your blood flukes, di ba? You remember your schistosomas? Di ba, there are three, di ba? There are three most common type of schistosomas: Mansoni, Hematobium, and Japonicum. What's the most common schistosoma affecting the gallbladder? Your Mansoni, di ba? Your Mansoni is characterized by lateral spine. Hematobium is terminal spine. Lateral nub, Japonicum, di ba? That's based on your parasitology, if you still remember. Now, other type of your flukes, you have your that can cause hepatobiliary obstruction, Clonorchis sinensis, which is associated with what type of cancer? Clonorchis sinensis is associated with cholangiocarcinoma. Don't forget, Clonorchis sinensis, your light bulb. Pistorchis viverini or Pistorchis filineus and Fasciola hepatica. Other parasites can also include Ascaris lumbricoides and Echinococcus. Clinical manifestations includes the following. It can cause chronic, recurrent pyogenic cholangitis, ductal stones, and biliary obstruction. Siyempre, you do visualization of the ductal abnormalities through cholangiography and, of course, stool examinations. Now we go to the last topic, your primary sclerosing cholangitis. So this is a progressive inflammatory sclerosing and obliterative disease affecting your intrahepatic bile ducts. So it's usually associated with IBD. So kapag if you're going to be asked which type of biliary tract disease is highly associated with IBD, especially ulcerative colitis, your answer should be primary sclerosing cholangitis. Diba? So, ang signs and symptoms niya, same with biliary obstruction. Right upper quadrant pain, pruritus, jaundice, and acute cholangitis. So the diagnosis can be cholangiography, either MRCP or ERCP, which you are going to see a beaded appearance. Now, for the last slide, for the prognosis, usually even regardless of the therapy, nasa 12 to 18 years lang ang mean survival rate ng patients with primary sclerosing cholangitis. And the prognostic variables that is used for the risk scoring is age, serum bilirubin, histologic stage, and splenomegaly. So it's highly likely to progress and lead to end-stage liver disease. And if the patient develops an end-stage liver disease, the common and definitive therapy for advanced diseases is still your liver transplantation. So you request for liver transplantation.